For as long as humans have existed, the question of what happens after death has remained, for the most part, very mysterious. For thousands of years, humans have speculated about the afterlife. Some believe that we are reincarnated. Others believe that we will go straight to heaven, whereas some believe that there is no afterlife at all, and that nothing happens. Some people simply want to dismiss the question altogether and say that we can't really know what the afterlife entails until we actually die. However, regardless of the answer, it can be quite frightening as to what the afterlife actually is. For example, if there is no afterlife, and consciousness simply ceases to exist once our brain stops working, then that would imply that there is absolutely nothing that we will ever experience after we die. On the other hand, if there is an afterlife, then we need to ask the question about what the afterlife may entail and what are its immediate effects as soon as our mind breaks away from our body. In this video, I hope to explain clearly what the idealist view of the afterlife may entail immediately after death. Keep in mind that the idealist view is compatible with a wide range of different religious beliefs about what the final destiny of mankind may entail. However, in this video, I want to focus mainly on what will happen to us immediately after we die. So that is what we will be looking into. In order to make any educated guesses about what happens to consciousness upon bodily death, one has to have some understanding of the relationship between body and consciousness during life. This relationship, of course, reflects on one's views on how they view the universe and the ontology of the universe. Let's take physicalism as an example. If physicalism is true, then consciousness is a byproduct of brain activity, which means that as soon as the brain dies, so does consciousness. And likewise, if consciousness ceases to exist as soon as the brain stops working, then there is nothing after death, and so there is no more experiences we will be having after death, and we will forever cease to exist and won't have any feelings or sensations or visual perceptions at all. The physicalist view of the afterlife is simply that there is nothing in the afterlife, and so we better enjoy the life we have now, because once our bodies decay and our brain stops working, we will have no more life experiences at all. On the other hand, if something like dualism is true, then there is a possibility of survival of someone's consciousness after bodily death. However, under such a view, there is still an ontology that is distinct in reality that's apart from consciousness, which entails that while consciousness may be existing, it doesn't imply that someone's consciousness actually increases. And so, in terms of the experience one is having after death, it's very unlikely that they would experiencing much at all. Now comes the idealist view of the afterlife. We need to remember that under idealism, only consciousness as its own ontology exists. This simply means that the ground for reality is consciousness, and that the reason that each person has a separate conscious inner life of their own is because we are disassociated alters of what is termed universal consciousness. Since the physical universe under idealism is created from universal consciousness, then the reason that we are disassociated alters of this universal consciousness, or the reason that we cannot control the physical world, is because we are disassociated from the physical world. However, this disassociation changes when we die. The death of our bodies and our brain is the end of disassociation, which means that the end of disassociation can only entail a reintegration of memory, identity, and emotions, which in turn will cause a self-transcendence. Self-transcendence, of course, is the abrupt broadening of one's sense of self through an enrichment of one's inner life. This can happen when one suddenly feels that they are no longer confined to the physical body, or when new mental states or experiences that were not previously developed by learning or training, or when one experiences emotions or inner imagery that could have never been possibly known beforehand by the subject. This means that bodily death under idealism must correlate with an expansion of our felt sense of identity, have access to a broader sense of memories, and an enrichment of our emotional inner life. This conclusion, of course, is the exact opposite of what Physicalism says. Physicalism says that as soon as we die, our consciousness simply ceases to exist, and that there is absolutely nothing we will ever experience once we die. But Idealism says that as soon as we die, it is not consciousness that ceases to exist. Rather, it is the disassociation that ceases to exist. And therefore, when we die, we will have an enrichment of inner life, and we will experience more things in the afterlife than we have ever experienced here in this life. In fact, one could actually get a glimpse of what the afterlife may entail when taking psychedelic drugs. In our video on the neuroscientific evidence for idealism, we showed how psychedelic drugs will increase in conscious inner life, but then decrease brain activity. This means that the more that we decrease brain activity from psychedelic drugs, it will increase inner life. Now, if we take this one step further and say that the brain simply dies off, and therefore disassociation would end, then the inner life experienced by the subject that has just died may in fact be having experiences that are far stronger than anything that psychedelic drugs can actually give them. The idealist view of the afterlife is supported by reports of near-death experiences and reports of psychedelic drugs which decrease brain activity, since in both cases they offer glimpses into the afterlife by increasing inner life. And given our entire series on the case for idealism, from philosophical arguments, to basic facts of reality, to quantum physics, to neuroscience, and into emergent space-time, it's clear from the evidence that there is more life awaiting for us after we die here in this world. Immediately after we die, instead of consciousness and our experiences ceasing to exist, they will instead be increasing, and we may experience far more things than we could ever possibly imagine.